So the next question is actually on emerging trends. So what are some of the emerging trends that will shape the future of workspace through technology as it continues to evolve? Let's not go to the AI piece yet, but really just trends in particular. So maybe Chris, you would like to start this conversation.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the trends I've seen is, with the merging of AV and IT, as Tim has spoken a bit about, audio AV is trying to incorporate some of the best parts of IT, the IT managed service models, offsite monitoring, offsite rectification. And I think this is kind of shown, by a lot of manufacturers, starting to develop some of their own monitoring and control-based platforms, right? So a couple of years ago, this wasn't really possible, or very few manufacturers could do it. But today, a lot of manufacturers are actually investing in this software layer, right? So I think the principle is they want to know how stuff is working. They want to know preemptively when stuff is broken. And for the system integrator that implements this, we are able to manage our resources better and be able to get the rectification works done in a shorter amount of time, right? So needless to say, I think this kind of system adds value, right? Because ultimately, if you're looking about the workplace environment, reliability is a huge thing, right? Things should work well and they should work all the time, not some of the time. And for us, I think this really represents a new business model for the system integration companies that traditionally have only really done maintenance and break fixes, and we send people over to get stuff repaired, right? But with all these platforms, it allows us to add value, to be more preemptive, to be able to get data, right, across the organization, look at what's performing well, and base our future designs and opinions upon, this data so that we can improve together. So I think this eventually, based on my estimation, probably less than 30% of the projects that we do are fully remote monitorable. But I think this will continue to climb, as time progresses and people start to see the value of this.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing a similar trend. I remember talking to SIs about remote monitoring really 20 years ago, and they would all tell me, oh, that sounds great, but the customers are not ready. The customers are not ready. But I can guarantee now, I'm engaging a lot of end users directly, and they're more excited about the capability than sometimes the SIs that I talk to. So absolutely, the customers are ready, and that's one trend that I've noticed, right? There is a awareness of, it's not just a one-time purchase, it is the lifetime, the return on the investment, right? So there's an understanding of, yes, it is worthwhile to invest in technology that can be monitored, that can be easily maintained. There's this cost to owning and operating it rather than just one-time purchase.
I think, there's a lot of really interesting trends in design, and I'm sort of trying to just focus on the ones that are sort of technology-based. And I think the biggest trend in design that sort of overlaps is this idea of flexibility and adaptability, right? So that's, as there's a more focus on user experience, that includes digital experience. And so it now with the technology era that we're in, where we've got technology that is lower in price, more reliable, quieter, more energy efficient, more accessible, it allows us to think of things at a bigger scale than we would have in the past. So we're now influenced by things like the Sphere in Las Vegas, this giant immersive environment. We're influenced by things like the Art and Science Museum, all the things that Team Labs are doing with projection mapping and all those things to create environments that essentially can become anything. So we talked a little bit about wellness rooms, but the fact is these immersive environments allow us to create single spaces that can adapt to multiple types of uses. So it's no longer the days of designing space with a dedicated use like a dining room, that sort of thing, are kind of going by the wayside. It's trying to find ways to adapt space for multiple use because we're trying to get more value out of the space that we have. Footprints are shrinking, but we want to get more value. So when you talk about adaptability and flexibility, technology plays a big role in that. What's more adaptable than digital technology? And additionally to that, the content management is becoming more intelligent and smarter. You're seeing things like generative content, using AI algorithms and data algorithms to create content, so you're not having to manage that as actively on the back end. And so all those things are leading to, again, a growth in the use of technology in ways that aren't just simply for meeting rooms anymore, but they're being used in ways to completely change the nature of environments.
Yeah, the flexibility aspect, absolutely. Yeah, I think we've all touched on that. You know, Chris, you were mentioning it earlier, this rise of flexible spaces, and so have Tim. And yeah, from a real estate perspective, with my real estate hat on, working with the real estate guy in the room, yeah, that's absolutely essential, because we have gone through a downsizing or in a reshifting of markets. We are looking now for better utilization of those spaces. And the best way you can do that is through flexibility, versatile spaces. I call it the boardroom situation, right? The boardroom, if we look from a tech perspective, and often from a fit out perspective, is the most expensive, least used room in an organization, right? We spend a fortune in terms of tech, consultancy, the SI. We always know that one's the most expensive. We have the most expensive table, fit out, furnitures, all the artwork, only for it to probably have the lowest utilization of any space overall. But when you were in there, it has to be working and it has to look good, and we always have to have one, right? We're beginning to break through that a little bit now, and we realize, based on trends like that, that is, lower utilization space is effectively unproductive space, and we want high productive spaces. So make it flexible, make it so that it can be a boardroom, but it can also be a training environment, and it can also be a presentation room, it can be a hybrid town hall event. We can use that technology in a far more flexible way to design and to get around that. That's an absolute trend. Linked to that, however, what we're also seeing is when we start asking those questions and having those conversations with clients, a lot of them say is, I don't actually know how often my boardroom gets used. And when it does get used, I don't actually know what type of meeting is happening in there. Is it 12 people just coming around and talking? Are they dialing somebody else in? Are they doing a presentation? And I think this is a big part that the industry has picked up from a client perspective around that data and that software part. Because as soon as I've got that software overlay, I can tell you how many times the screen was turned on, how many times people connected a USB-C or an HDMI. And using that data, I can then fine tune exactly what needs to go into that space. You know what? I'm seeing that 90% of the meetings that happen in that space all use the screen. They're all projecting. We need to look at screens. And 90% of the time, they're using the USB-C. Let's ditch the HDMI. Let's make it really simple. Let's make it one cable. Let's look at the type of presentations that are happening and maybe get a different screen orientation, because we might have two 16:9s that could become one larger one, so on and so forth. Using the data of your specific organization to then optimize your spaces is the next evolution that we're seeing moving forward from that. And it can only be fueled by getting the right data.
You mentioned boardrooms, and I think it's interesting because over time, as designers, we always build personas for the designs that we do, and we had that sort of executive persona for many years, and you could kind of picture it in your mind. But over the years, that the demographics of that person that utilizes those rooms have changed, and with the emergence of what we sort of refer to as the startup CEO has come to fore, and that's a much younger demographic, somebody that isn't attracted to these dark wood rooms with these high back chairs. And so because of that, the demographics are changing. They do want to use these spaces for different things. They're not so interested in the way that people have done it, in the past with these sort of fixed boardroom style rooms. And so, all of this is informing the way that we're rethinking how these rooms are designed and how they're used.
Yeah. One trend that I'd like to discuss is how I'm seeing our industry has come full circle. I remember when I first started, it was more about our channel partners providing a design to the end users, and they were the experts, and no one really questioned their product choices and applications. And then over the years, with the rise of internet and information, a lot of end users became empowered to make some of these choices themselves. And there was a bit of a commoditization of our industry. It was more about, how do I deliver the right set of equipment to the end user that they want, with the lowest price, so without killing myself, really, right? And became a very commoditized sort of model. But lately, I'm starting to see, because the technology has evolved so quickly, that there is a lack of full understanding of what's capable and what's available and what we can do across multiple layers of the organization. So I think the people who are most successful in our industry are the ones who can provide that consultation again, right? It become, again, full circle back to how things were when I first started. But we're dealing with different set of circumstances. But again, it's more about conveying, understanding the user requirements and delivering the right solution with the right intent and purpose, using the right set of technology. Yep. But it really comes down to the fact that there needs to be some people who are very well versed in what we're capable of as an industry. So, in terms of trends, this full circle of commoditization and coming back to becoming a consultant-based industry, I think is great, because it does open up a lot of possibilities and opportunities for us. Yeah.
I think as we make progress, maybe I envision a future where people stop calling us the projector guys or the Cisco Polycom guys. But jokes aside, right? I think, back to Simon's point, when we're talking about the kind of data sets that we can get, right? We used to be in a place where we could tell whether a room was utilized or not, right? Obviously, the devil's in the details, right? So you have a boardroom and it's utilized, but it's utilized by like 2 or 3 people at a time, right? And sporadic parts of the day, right? That tells you a lot, right? That, what the design of the boardroom was actually meant to do was, to have larger meetings, and the space isn't really being utilized as intended, right? So, with the progression of technology, we are able to pull more and more data sets, right? You mentioned about, in meetings, who doesn't turn on their camera, right? Who doesn't speak so much. Now you can even check who doesn't attend your meetings, but just uses Copilot to get a summary of the meetings, right? I'm thinking you probably do that sometimes, Simon. But yeah, so I think it's good because we can see the progression of technology, right? I think COVID has really driven innovation in this area a lot, and you see a lot of the innovation in the last 3 years, right? Supersedes probably the innovation in the last 6 years preceding that, right? And that's really a good thing for us.
The open plan workspace is still a trend that's continuing. It's not necessarily going to change, but the fact is, we do know that there's a need for privacy, right? Because you're still taking remote calls, and sometimes it's really hard when you're in an open desking area with a bunch of people around you. So even though maybe we're not building as many private offices, there's still lots of private space being designed because of that need continues. And so that the part of the reason people are using boardrooms is because they're going in there to have calls because they can't have it in the open space. And so it means that as designers, we have to take that seriously and say, all right, we don't want to be using giant rooms for 2 or 3 people to go in there to have calls. We need to build smaller spaces, smaller private spaces to accommodate those things. So all of this data really supports how we design and how we optimize design.
Yeah. All right, so really very wide-ranging topics, but I would say, something that is very common between the 4 of you is like, how could we, really shape the rooms to fit user requirements, how to not have wastage, basically, and technology actually enables that